So we're diving into this book, you know, the role of religion, counting the narratives of critical race theory.
Yeah.
It's been making some waves, and it seems like it's, aimed at guys like like the, shall we say, red-pilled crowd.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is how it kind of speaks directly to that audience, you know? Like, it acknowledges the concerns that a lot of men have about, how society is changing. And it offers solutions, but it's, like, rooted in traditional values.
Yeah, it's like the author was, like, browsing the married red pill subreddit or something.
Yeah. I'll be honest, at first I was a little skeptical. Like, is this just another one of those man-up books? Like, ignore all the, all the craziness going on. But it actually goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
Like, it really critiques this whole idea of the woke agenda and how it's impacting us, especially when it comes to critical race theory.
It doesn't just critique, though.
It really dives into how religion, like the more traditional teachings, can give us a totally different framework for understanding all this stuff, like race and gender roles.
Yeah.
And it emphasizes unity and personal responsibility instead of all this, division we see everywhere.
Okay, so let's break it down. Like, what does the book actually say about CRT?
Okay.
Like, how does it define it? What are, like, the core tenets?
So it starts with the basics. Like what CRT is and the key figures behind it. You've got people like Richard Delgado, Jean Stefanchik, and of course Kimberly Crenshaw.
Oh yeah, those are the big names.
Right?
Yeah.
And it even goes into Crenshaw's concept of intersectionality.
Okay, hold on. For those of us who aren't academics, maybe break that down a bit.
Sure. So intersectionality basically means that different forms of oppression, like racism and sexism, they can overlap and create a very unique experience for individuals.
Gotcha.
So, like, the black woman might face discrimination that's different from both a white woman and a black man. It's about understanding the complexities of how these different identities intersect.
Okay, so then how does the book critique intersectionality? I mean, it sounds like an important concept.
Well, the book argues that while the intention behind intersectionality is good, the way it plays out can actually lead to more division.
Really?
Instead of uniting people against, like, common forms of oppression, it can create this hierarchy of victimhood where everyone's competing for recognition of their own struggle.
Ah, so that's where the whole divisiveness argument comes in.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book also says that CRT focuses too much on race at the expense of class, which the author believes, really hinders unity. It suggests that this focus on race creates more resentment and animosity between different racial groups instead of encouraging them to come together to, address shared problems.
That makes sense. And you mentioned earlier that the book's pretty critical of how CRT is influencing education.
Oh, yeah.
What's the take there?
Well, it basically argues that instead of schools being places for open inquiry and critical thinking, they're becoming more like ideological battlegrounds where CRT is being used to push a very specific agenda.
So it's like indoctrination, not education.
That's one of the central arguments.
Wow.
It gives the example of how classic literature is now analyzed only through the lens of power dynamics and oppression, instead of, exploring its artistic merit or universal themes.
Yeah, I can see how that would resonate with a lot of guys who feel like the education system's pushing a worldview that they just don't agree with.
Absolutely. And it all ties into this larger concern the book raises, which is the decline of objectivity and critical thinking in society.
Okay, this is where things get interesting.
Right.
How does it connect CRT to this, like, decline in objectivity?
So it ties this trend back to postmodernism, which is the idea that there's no one objective truth, only different perspectives.
Right.
And the author argues that this has led to a dangerous relativism where anyone's opinion is valid, even if it's not backed up by evidence.
So it's like feelings trump facts.
Yeah, basically. And the book argues that this is impacting everything, from science to education to politics to how we talk to each other.
Yeah.
And it uses a powerful analogy to drive home the point.
Oh, yeah?
It says, it's like trying to build a house on quicksand.
Whoa. Okay, that's a strong image.
Right.
What does that even mean in this context?
Well, basically it's saying that if we reject the idea of objective truth and we embrace this ever-changing landscape of subjective interpretations, then we're building our society on an unstable foundation.
I see, and I'm guessing that's where the book's critique of victimhood culture comes in.
Exactly. The book argues that this decline in objectivity has created a culture where people are encouraged to see themselves as victims, always looking for offenses and injustices.
Yeah, constantly offended.
Yeah.
All right, well, this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to have to take a break, but we'll be back to dig deeper into the role of religion. and how it tackles these issues. So stay with us.
So this victimhood culture, the book argues, is actually fueled by the language of CRT itself.
Okay.
Like it points to terms like privilege and safe spaces,
Right.
saying they've been weaponized to silence anyone who disagrees and create an atmosphere where people are just afraid to speak their mind.
Okay, I see how that could be a concern, but couldn't you argue that those terms also serve a purpose? Like safe spaces? I always thought they were meant to create environments where marginalized groups could, feel comfortable expressing themselves without fear of judgment or harassment.
The book acknowledges that, and it
Okay.
claims there's a double standard in how they're applied. Like certain groups are given a free pass to say whatever they want, no matter how controversial it is,
Right.
while others get shut down or labeled as intolerant for expressing different opinions.
So it's less about the terms themselves and more about how they're being used to shut down debate.
Exactly. And the solution the book proposes is reclaiming language, restoring its original intent.
It sounds like a pretty tall order.
Yeah.
How do we do that in a world where these terms are just thrown around constantly?
Yeah, it's tough. The book doesn't really offer an easy answer,
Okay.
but it calls for courage and critical thinking, urging readers to really question the narratives they're being fed and to engage in open dialogue even when it's uncomfortable.
Right.
It's about recognizing that real progress comes from respectful debate and a willingness to consider different perspectives.
Okay, so we've talked about how the book defines CRT and the problems it sees with it. But what about solution?
Right.
Does it offer any concrete ways to address these issues?
One of the key solutions is personal responsibility.
Okay.
It argues that this is key to overcoming that victim mentality and actually achieving success in life.
But isn't that a little simplistic? Don't systemic issues play a role too?
The book acknowledges that, societal structures and historical injustices can create barriers for some people,
Right.
but it emphasizes that dwelling on those things won't lead to any positive change.
Okay.
It stresses the importance of focusing on what you can control, your actions, your choices, and your mindset.
I can see how that could be empowering,
Yeah.
Especially for men who feel like they're constantly being told they're privileged and therefore responsible for all the world's problems.
Exactly. That's exactly the point the book's trying to make. It pushes back against that narrative that men should feel guilty or ashamed of their masculinity. Instead, it encourages them to embrace the positive aspects of manhood.
Like what?
Things like strength, leadership, and a sense of responsibility,
Right.
while also recognizing the importance of things like compassion and emotional intelligence.
So it's not about denying privilege, but about taking responsibility for your own actions and striving to be a better person.
Exactly. And it ties this back to traditional values. The idea that hard work, determination, and a willingness to take risks are essential for success. It uses examples of people like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford,
Oh, wow. Okay.
who built empires from nothing, through sheer grit and resilience.
Yeah, and that's a stark contrast to what the book calls entitlement culture.
Right.
Can you explain that a bit more?
So the book argues that entitlement culture fosters this belief that success is owed to you rather than earned through hard work. And it links that back to victimhood culture, suggesting that both lead to a lack of motivation and a sense of helplessness.
Okay, that makes sense. So personal responsibility is one solution. What else does the book suggest?
Another interesting solution it explores is assimilation.
Assimilation. Isn't that a bit controversial?
It can be.
Yeah, some people argue that it's just cultural erasure, forcing minority groups to
The
conform.
book addresses that directly.
Okay.
It distinguishes between assimilation and cultural appropriation, saying that true assimilation is a natural blending of cultures, not a forced thing. It uses the melting pot analogy.
Right.
Like when different cultures come together, they can create something new and exciting while still maintaining their unique identities.
That's interesting. So the book sees assimilation as a way to build social cohesion.
Exactly. It contrasts this with societies that have fallen apart because of conflict and division from lack of assimilation.
Yeah, diversity without unity can be pretty dangerous.
For sure. So yeah, the book's saying it's important to celebrate diversity, but it's also crucial to find that common ground and build a shared sense of belonging.
That makes sense. And that ties into another solution the book brings up, right?
Yeah.
Autocracy.
Meritocracy.
Exactly.
But I thought that was under attack these days.
It is. And the book acknowledges the challenges, but it argues that meritocracy is still the fairest system we have.
Okay.
It's a system where you're rewarded based on your talents and your efforts, not your background.
Right. So it's not about who you are, but what you can do. Precise. And it contrasts this with identity politics, which it says focuses too much on group identity and not enough on individual merit.
Okay, so the book's advocating for a system where everyone has a fair shot based on their ability.
Exactly. It even gives historical examples of meritocratic systems like ancient Greece and the Chinese civil service exams.
Wow. So these systems have worked in the past.
Yeah, but the book does recognize that even meritocracy can be flawed.
Right.
Like bias and systemic inequalities can still exist.
Of course.
But it ultimately advocates for preserving meritocracy because it believes it's still the best way to ensure fairness and reward individual achievement.
That's a really interesting perspective. We've got
Yeah.
personal responsibility, assimilation, and meritocracy. Anything else?
We can't forget the book's central argument, the role of religion as a counter-narrative to CRT.
Oh, yeah, right? You mentioned that earlier, but I'm curious to hear more. How does the book see religion as the solution?
It suggests that traditional religious teachings offer a different framework for understanding race and gender, one that emphasizes unity, harmony, and the inherent dignity of every individual.
Which is a pretty stark contrast to CRT, right?
Exactly. The book argues that religion can provide a moral compass,
Go.
a set of values that go beyond our individual differences and unite us around a common purpose.
Interesting. So the book is saying that religion can help us overcome those divisions that CRT seems to highlight.
Exactly. And it emphasizes how religion promotes things like personal responsibility, forgiveness, and compassion,
Right.
all of which are essential for building a more just and harmonious society.
So it's advocating for a return to those traditional religious values as a way to counter the narratives of CRT.
That's one of the central arguments.
Okay.
It suggests that these values are a solid foundation for building strong families, healthy relationships, and a sense of community that goes beyond race and culture.
I'm curious how the book connects this to the role of men.
It highlights the importance of strong male leadership in countering these narratives. It suggests that men have a special role in shaping future generations and promoting a more balanced and harmonious society.
But isn't that a little outdated? I mean, women are just as capable of leadership as men, right?
The book doesn't deny the importance of female leadership,
Okay.
but it argues that there's a specific need for strong, virtuous men who can be role models for young boys and offer a counterbalance to what it sees as the negative influences of feminism and woke ideology.
I can see where it's coming from.
Yeah.
There's definitely a conversation happening right now about the role of men in society, and this book seems to be tapping into that.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just leadership.
Okay.
The book also emphasizes the importance of men reclaiming those positive aspects of masculinity.
Such as?
Things like courage, strength, and a sense of responsibility for providing and protecting their family.
How does it address concerns about toxic masculinity then?
It acknowledges the dangers of extreme, It cautions against that hypermasculinity that glorifies aggression and dominance. But it also argues that there's a balance to be struck.
Yeah.
Men shouldn't be ashamed of their natural instincts or pressured to conform to some narrow definition of masculinity that denies their inherent strengths.
So it's about finding that middle ground where men can be strong but also sensitive.
Exactly. And it connects this to the importance of fathers being actively involved in their children's lives.
Right.
The book argues that strong, involved fathers are crucial for raising well-adjusted kids, especially boys who need those positive male role models.
That's a powerful message, and I think it speaks to a desire that a lot of men have, to
Yeah.
connect with their kids, to guide them and pass on their values.
Absolutely.
But the book doesn't sugarcoat things, does it?
Nope.
It acknowledges the challenges that families face today.
It dives right into the issues that are eroding that traditional family structure.
Like what?
Things like divorce, absentee fathers, the decline of religious faith, and just the general pressures of modern life.
And it connects all of that back to the woke agenda we talked about.
Yes, the book argues that many of these trends are driven by a worldview that undermines traditional values and institutions.
Okay, so if we're caught in this web of all these interconnected issues,
Right.
like from CRT to the decline of the family to the crisis of masculinity,
Yeah.
what's the way forward?
The book doesn't offer a simple solution. It recognizes that these are complex problems.
Yeah.
But it does offer a path forward. It calls for a return to those traditional values, a rediscovery of faith, and a commitment to personal
So
responsibility.
it's about taking action, being the change you want to see.
Exactly. Recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future, and that even small acts of courage and commitment can make a difference.
That's inspiring.
It's a call to stand up for what you believe in, to defend those values, and
Yeah.
to build a better world for ourselves and for future generations.
This has been a really fascinating discussion. We've covered a lot of ground. What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the emphasis on the power of narratives.
Right.
The stories we tell ourselves about the world have a huge impact on how we live. And this book offers a different narrative, one that challenges those prevailing views on race, gender, and the role of religion.
It's a call to question everything we've been taught and to see the world in a new way.
Exactly.
And it's not just about accepting this new narrative, but actually living it out through personal responsibility, strong families, and a commitment to our community.
Right. It's about taking ownership of our lives, embracing those roles as men, and working to create a more just and harmonious society.
So if any of this has resonated with you, I highly encourage you to check out The Role of Religion, Countering the Narratives of Critical Race Theory.
Yeah, it's a great read.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's worth a look.
It might just give you a new perspective on some of the most important issues we're facing today.
Definitely.
And who knows, it might even inspire you to take action and be a part of building that better future.
You know, one thing that really struck me was how the author used this analogy about people's obsession with, like, deconstructing everything these days.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
He compares it to, like, taking apart a clock.
Okay.
Like a perfectly good working clock.
Yeah.
You take it apart, you examine all the gear, the springs, and then you have no idea how to put it back together.
Huh. Yeah, I get that. It's like
Yeah.
we're so busy analyzing and picking everything apart that we forget how it all works together, you know?
Exactly. And the book's saying that this deconstruction mindset is just causing a ton of chaos and confusion.
Right.
Especially when we try to understand these complex social issues. It's like we've taken apart the clock of society and now we're lost.
Yeah, we're left with a pile of gears.
Right.
No instruction manual.
Exactly. Speaking of which, I thought it was interesting how the book uses all these historical examples.
Yeah, it doesn't just stay theoretical.
No, it's like the author's saying, hey, this isn't just some academic debate. This stuff has real world consequences. Like when he talks about assimilation, he brings up the Roman Empire,
Right.
how they integrated people from all these different backgrounds, and it contributed to their success.
Right. But then he also mentions societies that have, like, completely fallen apart.
Oh, yeah, because of internal conflicts and lack of unity.
Exactly. And I think for the guys who are already skeptical of the mainstream narrative, you know,
Yeah.
those historical examples really hit home.
Absolutely.
It's like a call to action almost. Like reclaim what's been lost.
Yeah.
Restore order and purpose.
And speaking of reclaiming, there's that whole section on reclaiming masculinity.
Right. So what's the take there?
It argues that men need to embrace their natural roles, you know,
As
protectors, providers, leaders,
Okay.
but in a healthy, balanced way.
Right, not the toxic kind.
Exactly. He cautions against both extremes, actually.
Yeah.
The toxic masculinity that's all about aggression and dominance,
Yeah.
but also what he calls the feminization of men.
So where's the balance?
He says men should be strong and assertive,
All right.
but also compassionate and emotionally intelligent.
So not just swinging back and forth between two extremes.
No, finding that middle ground where strength and sensitivity can coexist.
I like that.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing he uses examples to illustrate this.
Oh, tons of them.
Yeah.
He pulls from history literature, even mythology,
Wow.
to show these positive male role models.
Okay.
Guys who embody both strength and virtue, who lead with courage, but also compassion.
So he's painting a picture of what true manhood looks like.
Yeah, it's not about fitting some stereotype. It's about being a good man, a man of character.
I think that's a message a lot of guys need to hear. But how does the book address those concerns about toxic masculinity then? You know, the kind that leads to violence and aggression.
It doesn't shy away from it at all.
Yeah.
It acknowledges the harm that comes from those unhealthy expressions of masculinity. But it argues that the solution isn't to just demonize all masculinity.
Right.
It's about redefining it, reclaiming it from those negative stereotypes.
So instead of telling men to suppress their natural instincts, it's about guiding them towards expressing them in a healthy way.
Exactly. Teaching them to be strong, but not aggressive. Confident, but not arrogant, protective, but not controlled.
And it all comes back to the importance of fathers.
Right. Absolutely. The book is really big on that.
Yeah.
It argues that fathers have this incredibly important role in their kids' lives,
Especially for sons.
especially for sons who are trying to figure out what it means to be a man in today's world.
It's a call for men to step up.
To be the fathers their children need.
Present, involved, loving, and strong.
Exactly. And I think that message resonates with a lot of guys who want to be good fathers.
I agree. But the book's honest about the challenges, too.
Oh, yeah. It dives into all the issues that are pulling families apart.
Okay.
Divorce, absentee fathers, the decline of religious faith, the pressures of modern life, all of it.
And it ties that back to that woke agenda we talked about.
Exactly. It argues that a lot of these trends are fueled by a worldview that undermines traditional values and institutions.
And that leads to what?
This feeling of fragmentation and instability in society, like things are falling apart.
So if we're stuck in this web of all these interconnected issues, where do we even go from here?
The book doesn't pretend to have all the answers. It recognizes how complex these problems are,
Yeah.
but it offers a path forward, calls for a return to traditional values, a rediscovery of faith, and a commitment to personal responsibility.
So it's not about waiting for someone else to fix things. It's about taking action ourselves.
It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future, and that even small actions can make a difference.
That's a powerful message.
It's a call to stand up for what we believe in, to defend those values, and to build a better world, for ourselves and for our children.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the role of religion.
It's a thought-provoking book for sure.
We've covered a lot of ground, from its critiques of critical race theory to its call for a return to traditional values and the importance of strong families and involved fathers.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. But I think it offers a lot of valuable insights and potential solutions for the challenges we're facing today. If any of this has resonated with you, I encourage you to check out the book for yourself. You can find The Role of Religion, Countering the Narratives of Critical Race Theory on Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books. It's definitely worth a read, and hopefully it will inspire you to think critically about these issues and to take action in your own life.
I second that.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive, and be sure to tune in next time for another thought-provoking discussion.